Wednesday afternoon, day of 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk a little Guardians and Cavs later in the show. We begin with the Browns and the Browns draft. Jamari Thrash, wide receiver, Browns pick later in day 3, continues to get some pretty good reviews. Sam Monson from PFF on the PFF NFL podcast on Thrash.
And I love Jamari Thrash as an addition. Like, they don't need him because they've already made moves, and that's a good receiving core already. But he could absolutely carve a role in that. Like, Thrash is a guy that was going to get completely overlooked in what is a stupidly loaded wide receiver class. But, like, I think Jamari Thrash belongs much higher up in the conversation this year than he actually ended up being. Really sudden mover, got some amazing yards after the catch plays, had some pretty bad quarterback play as well. His testing was pretty average, which I think is part of why he slipped as far as he did. But he's a great poster child for the PFF gas. The tracking data had him consistently elite for 3 straight years. So given his instinctive adjustments to the ball, instinctive adjustments to the quarterback, the only thing he doesn't do well is he's just not a contested catch guy in any way, shape, or form. Like, he is going to get, if it's close at the catch point, he's probably going to lose. But he's good at separating. Like, he's almost Jerry Jeudy in that regard, right? He's really good at separating. But if it's contested by the time the ball arrives, he's not your guy.
Well, now let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, I'm not crazy about that, but you can work around that. And the other thing about Thrash, get him in the weight room, get him a little stronger. Contested catches are things that you can work on.
Yeah, I think so. I do think, some of it is just his body type. Sub 6 foot receivers, you don't expect them to be, body control type specialists at receiver. You expect them more to be quick, twitchy guys, and that's what Jamari Thrash is. I think, even looking at his testing numbers that Sam Monson was referring to, it feels like watching his highlights, he was just much faster than that. I think the Senior Bowl, he might have been clocked at somewhere between 20 and 21 miles an hour at top speed. So that's an indication of just how fast he is. I think he's just seems like a pure football player to me who, he had a hand injury, his final season that obviously, limited some of his production and I think kind of hurt his stock a little bit. But, I think it was on NFL Network. I can't remember what DraftCast had it that said if this was not as deep a receiver class, he might have been a 3rd round pick. And then he also saw Steve Smith really raving about Jamari Thrash as a player, as a prospect, saying that he's incredibly smart. And when you have smart players with that kind of twitchiness, you have guys who have an ability to succeed. And for a late 5th round pick, that's as good as you can hope for.
All right, one of the big concerns that we've kind of touched around it, high percentage of drops. Found out that he did have a hand injury. Take a look at this. It's kind of interesting. Before the hand injury, 8 games, 5 drops. After the hand injury, 4 games, 3 drops. So it appears that the dropping issue is a concern. The injury certainly impacted it. It still averaged almost 88 yards, 87.8 yards per game, 7 touchdowns. He's a guy that you're not counting on him being your 1, 2, 3. He's probably at best your wide receiver 4, maybe wide receiver 5.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are guys you kind of need as complementary pieces. What I think he brings is a lot of what they don't have, that speed and quickness that can operate into the slot, but can also go out to the perimeter. And when you talk about the injury he had as well, the other thing that I think stood out about me is he's got small hands. Even looking at his pro day measurements in his hands, 8 3/4 inches. Those aren't big hands. Obviously, being a smaller guy, he's not going to have bigger hands, but typically when you have smaller hands, physics just says it's harder to catch a football. So you can understand in some way, why Jamari Thrash has some of those struggles. And the fact that, he continued to play through the hand injury, obviously limited his effectiveness. But I think that you kind of like to see that. You kind of like to see, players playing through difficult injuries. And it seems like, competitiveness and toughness, those are hallmark elements of Thrash's game that you would hope carry over into the pros as you get a chance as coaches to get in and develop his game a little bit more.
All right, so this is kind of interesting as well. It's from PFF Browns. Amari Cooper with 12, Jerry Jeudy with 10. So that is 22 combined receptions of 40-plus yards since 2022. Those are those explosive plays that you're looking for, and man, that's a lot. 22 is a lot.
Especially with a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, who likes to throw the ball deep down the field. I think that's, what you want to see is you want players who are going to be able to get down the field and make those plays. We saw Amari Cooper do that regardless of who the quarterback was. He was catching deep balls from Deshaun Watson, P.J. Walker, Joe Flacco, pretty much anybody they threw out there. Amari Cooper was able to make the catch. And with Jerry Jeudy, I think if you're the Browns, you hope that this is his best year, because you have to imagine Deshaun Watson's the most talented quarterback he's played with so far in his NFL career. Not being the number one guy certainly has to take some pressure off him as well, knowing that there'll be a tension with Amari Cooper. He's going to learn a lot. You would imagine he's going to learn a lot from Amari Cooper. But you have two speedier guys. I think Jeudy I tested faster at the combine, than Cooper. But with Cooper's separation ability, I think that allows him to get downfield in addition to having above average speed. So certainly having a couple of field stretchers out there really should open things up more for this offense.
All right. The other thing that's become abundantly clear, Browns want to make sure they are not caught short on the offensive line. Take a look at this. So these are the number of starts for the offensive linemen. Bitonio at 144, Conklin 94, Teller 75, Posick 68, Jedrick Wills 53. Then in reserve, you're bringing in guys. Afidi has 83 career starts. Brian Allen, who they just signed, 32. Adeniji has 15. James Hudson, 14. Doesn't mention DeJuan Jones, along with Whippler, Michael Dunn, and the draft pick, Zack. They are deep. And if one of those young guys, steps up and they feel really comfortable, you could see him trade one of those veterans, Afidi, Allen, for some capital. Those guys become assets because of how many starts and how experienced they are.
Yeah, even look at this year's offensive line class. Obviously, it was a very good class, but, especially in the first and second round, you saw those guys kind of fly off the board because there's always a need for good offensive line play. And I think with the Browns, we saw an extreme case of, attrition. Again, being down to their fourth and fifth offensive tackles. The odds that would happen again feel very slim. But when you look at just, the depth chart, like it was pointed out there, that's about almost 150 offensive line starts for bench guys. And that's not including DeJuan Jones, who certainly could be a starter, as early as this season. I would imagine Jack Conklin gets the first shot at it, the real shot at it, because he's a vet, but DeJuan Jones certainly looks starting caliber. I think Zack could be a starter down the road. It goes back to the old saying, you can't have too many good offensive linemen. You can't have too much experience up there, and especially the way the Browns want to play offense in this AFC North against so many good defenses like we see in Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, although the Bengals have some reworking to do on that side of the football. It just comes down to making sure you have the depth on the offensive line. Every team wants it, and it seems like the Browns have done a good job stockpiling.
All right, so this is from the Factory of Sadness. 3 Browns veterans who could be cut following the NFL draft. Number 1, they say Jordan Akins, tight end. Not sure who would play tight end if they cut him. Number 2, Pierre Strong. I'm going to disagree with that one too. Number 3, Siaka Ika. I'm going to go, I don't think any of those 3 are going to, I don't see any of those 3 guys getting released.
Yeah, Akins for me is definitely not, I can't imagine he's going anywhere. They didn't draft the tight end in this draft. I think the only tight end they signed as a UDFA was Trayton Welch from Wyoming, so I would imagine Akins is pretty safe. They made depth acquisitions behind him, particularly Giovanni Ricci, but there really is no one else behind David Njoku that makes you feel like he should be worried about his job security too much. When it comes to running back, same type of thing. They didn't draft one either, so you would have to imagine Pierre Strong might be pretty safe, at least right now. Obviously, it kind of hinges on Nick Chubb's health and kind of where he is, in mandatory minicamp and training camp, how close he is to coming back off those 2 knee surgeries. So you would have to, it'll be interesting to kind of see where he is health-wise, because I think that, as much as anything, will dictate, Pierre Strong's roster spot. And with Siaki Ika, I don't know if you saw the picture the Browns posted. I think it was last night with some of the defensive linemen. He looks like he slimmed down a little bit and he's gotten stronger. And I think that was kind of a criticism of Ika in his rookie season is, maybe needed to keep his weight under control a little bit. And it seems like he kind of has done that. I remember a couple weeks ago there was a podcast. I guess Bill Belichick was talking about how he typically done like to grade rookies till the middle of their second season because you want to give them the full off season in the NFL strength program, understanding what they need to do to be successful veterans, and that's why you see so many guys make the leap from year 1 to year 2. So in that regard, Ika really interests me as someone I want to see. Okay, if he's cut weight, how much quicker does he look? Can he be more effective than he was as a rookie? I've said before, D tackle is kind of a redshirt position. So Ika's a guy I'm interested to see, and I don't know if I think his roster status would be more about the competition at defensive tackle more than anything, honestly.
Yeah, and we know Andrew Berry doesn't give up easily on his draft picks. Ika was a third-round pick. They're going to give him some time to see if he can develop. Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. Some national rankings from the Browns draft. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. This from CBSSports.com's Ryan Wilson, their national NFL guy, ranking every team's draft class. Drafts that left me wanting more. He goes Browns. They were number 29 overall, grade B-. It's because they didn't have a whole lot of picks. Favorite pick, Michael Hall Jr., twitched up defensive lineman, consistently disruptive. If he learns to play with lower pad level, good luck stopping him. Best value, Juwan Briggs. Plays with a nonstop motor, is stout at the point of attack, moves well laterally, and he complements Michael Hall Jr.'s style. Most surprising pick, thought they took Zack Zinter a little early, but I get it. When he's healthy, he's a starter. And taking him in the middle of the third round instead of the fourth is worth it for a player you love. Well, Tim, I like the pick of Zinter. They didn't have a fourth-round pick, so they went from 3 to 5, and I think Zinter eventually, as you said, I think he's a starter. He's a guy, before he got hurt, you knew who Zack Zinter was on that Michigan offensive line. You knew when he was run blocking who he was blocking.
Yeah, I mean, he was the heart and soul of that Michigan offensive line. All you have to do is, think about the reaction in the stadium, when he got injured in that game against Ohio State. He had 100,000 plus people chanting, "Let's go, Zack." So that's how much he meant, I think, to that entire team as kind of the captain of that offensive line. And that offensive line was arguably the best in college football over the last couple of seasons. Borderline NFL type of offensive line, just with how physical they were, how strong they were, how they just seemed like they outmuscled everybody at the point of attack. Zinter is definitely a pick, I think, for 2025 and beyond for sure. Maybe he gets into games this year because, your guys are always going to get banged up, especially on the offensive line, and you may need him out there for a handful of snaps or even a couple starts depending on, injury situations. We know Joel Bitonio missed a little bit of time this year. But with Bitonio and Wyatt Teller getting older, it was a smart move to make. And I think, with that draft grade as well, just being, 29th, like you said, there's really only so much they can do. The Browns didn't have a top 50 pick. They were the last team to make a pick for the first time, and 2 top 150 picks, there's only so much you can do. So in that situation, you're just hoping to find good value and guys you hope you can develop going forward.
Yeah, and if lower pad level, the criticism they have of Michael Hall, the guys that are playing with him, the veterans, they're going to show him exactly some of the tricks of that. All right, this from Jack Duff, and it's kind of interesting. Browns now 7 defensive tackles to likely condense into 5 roster spots. So you got Tomlinson, Harris, Jefferson, Hurst, Ika, Hall, Briggs. So you know what? You're getting a little younger with Ika, Hall, and Briggs. The veteran, I like. You can, when you look at it there, you can see a succession plan that Andrew Berry has right there. That kind of illustrates it.
Yeah, you're kind of hoping, Michael Hall Jr. can be your long-term starter in the interior going forward. You look at some of the defensive tackles that have come up over the last few years, how much they're getting paid. You hope Michael Hall Jr. can be that guy, and he certainly has the tools to be that guy. And then you look at the depth around him, Dalvin Tomlinson obviously going to start, Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, lots of experience. They signed Quinn Jefferson, so there's a lot of veteranship in front of him where he's not going to be asked to play a lot right away. Maybe on third down passing situations, because I still think he's got a little bit to learn, but he's still young, not going to turn 21 till later this year, so there's a long runway for him to grow and develop kind of at his own pace. And I think that's the best thing you want to see for a young player is, you don't want to force them on the field till they're ready, and even maybe then you want to shelter them until they kind of show that maybe they're too good to take off the field. So that's an interesting thing there with that. And when it comes to the back end of that depth chart, at defensive tackle, Andrew Berry talks about all the time. It's competition. You always want to have that competition as much as you can on the roster. And it's going to be interesting to see how the bottom part of that plays out with a third-round pick in Nika, a late seventh-round pick of Juwan Briggs, and a veteran in Maurice Hurst, who looked really good last season before he suffered an injury.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say about Hall, Jim Schwartz, he knows how to coach defensive tackles. He has a history of having elite defensive tackles. And he was involved in making sure that Michael Hall was drafted. So he has a plan, and I'm sure he knows how to develop a tackle like Michael Hall. Take a look at this. Back to Zack Zinter. I really like the pick of Zinter. These are his 2023 numbers among NCAA guards with 290-plus pass blocking snaps. Number 1 in sacks allowed, number 1 in quarterback hits allowed, tied for 6th in pressures allowed with 5. And the criticism of is pass blocking, because they didn't pass block a whole lot at Michigan. They ran the ball. And he is a mauler in the run game.
Yeah, definitely. I think he does need to add maybe a little more weight. I think he was in the low 300s. If he can put on, about 10 to 15 more pounds, I think he got a guy who can really be a force, in the run the pass game. But like you said, obviously they didn't have a lot of pass attempts, but the fact that he didn't give up a sack for an entire season is absolutely remarkable, considering, some of the good Big Ten defenses he's had to face. He's had to face Penn State's defense, Ohio State's defense. So certainly some good defenses they've gone up against, and the fact that he's been so stout, so steady, and he really didn't even allow J.J. McCarthy to get touched last season, it bodes well for him. And again, he's going to be in a good spot coming to Cleveland because he's going to learn from one of the best to do it in the last, 15 years or so with Joel Bitonio. I mean, I got to imagine, with Zinter's, great mentality, his leadership, and all those sorts of things, the intangible he has, he's going to soak up a lot from Joel Bitonio, and I think he's in a good spot to learn. And with the depth that they have at offensive guard with 2 starters in there, again, coming off a broken tibia and fibula, he's got a little time. They don't need to rush him in there until he's ready to go, and even then, take a little time. I mean, it's all about getting these guys kind of ready to go. Not even necessarily for this year, but next year, and even maybe the year after that down the road. So this was definitely a futures pick.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. We'll talk about the other teams in the AFC North, what they did. We'll take a look at a couple of rookie undrafted free agents. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. So, Tim, I know you wrote an article. You graded all 32 of the teams after the NFL draft. we'll stick to the North, the AFC North. Steelers, A+. Ravens, and you see, Steelers always draft well. Ravens, A-. Again, Ravens always draft well. They got Nate Wiggins, a cornerback. Some feel the best cover corner. They needed that. Browns, B+, and also the Bengals, B+. Bottom line is this division is the best division in football, and Steelers and the Ravens have been drafting really well for a while. Browns and the Bengals are starting to draft just as good.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to a point where, even we saw it a little bit last season, though the team who finishes in dead last is still a very good football team. So it's just kind of, it's kind of like the way it is in the SEC. It seems like great teams are just kind of cannibalizing each other so that when you get to the playoffs, maybe you're not the same team you were early in the season. So that's kind of what the AFC North has turned into. But, looking at the grades, the Steelers, A+. I mean, I love the way Omar Khan attacked the offensive line, drafting 3 offensive linemen, all interior guys within the first handful of rounds. I mean, my goodness. There was obviously the criticism for the last couple of years of the Steelers. The offensive line hasn't been good. If even just 1 or 2 of these guys pan out, I mean, this team has a chance to be a real problem, especially if they can get quarterback figured out. With Baltimore, I really like kind of what they did in day 3. I kind of termed the pick of TJ Tampa in the 4th round as kind of the Eric DeCosta special, because that seems like he's done a great job of taking those, of just pouncing on guys that have been falling down the boards, falling down the rankings, and are still there all the way late, and that's what he seems to do. Nate Wiggins is an interesting pick. I like him, but with Cooper DeJean there, I thought he would have been the perfect Baltimore Raven. 6 foot, 200+ pounds, run support type of corner who's an absolute playmaker. That's the one criticism I have out of Baltimore's class. And we talked about Cleveland and the Browns with the B+. It's not a lot to work with. It's ultimately, just trying to do the best with what you have. And I thought Mike Hall certainly worth that 54th pick because of that upside, because he already has tools that you don't have at defensive tackle. The Browns really don't have that kind of explosive, disruptive guy in the middle to just create havoc as a pass rusher. And there were some solid depth picks in day 3. Jamari Thrash, Miles Harden were really intriguing picks. And with the Bengals, they got the B+. Obviously, they, like every other team in the division, got after the offensive line early. Amarius Mims, I mean, he is a big dude. I think about 342 pounds. May need a little time to redshirt. Maybe not redshirt, but to sit and develop a little bit. They do have Orlando Brown Jr. and Trent Brown as the starters right now, so they can take a little time with him. Chris Jenkins, I was a big Chris Jenkins fan coming out. I think he can help replace the departure of DJ Reader. Jermaine Burton is also another interesting piece, speed, and it gives you insurance depending on what happens with T. Higgins.
Yeah, and the Burton thing, he'd have gone a lot higher if you didn't have the red flags with kind of the attitude and some of those things. So could end up being a really good wide receiver if he can kind of get those things figured out. All right, couple of undrafted rookie free agents for the Browns that kind of jump out. One of them is an offensive lineman, Javion Cohen, Miami of Florida. This is from his scouting report from the Combine. Was at Alabama. So his 2022 Alabama displayed his potential quickness. Miami liked his maturity, his approach, gathers weight to redirect, connect, pulling across, his run blocker, long arms, corral opponents outside shoulder, direct punch, early extension to maximize pass pro, usually keeps his eyes and on twists and the likes in blitz formations. All right, weaknesses. Played heavy at Miami 2023, impacting his quickness, body control. Not very commanding into first contact as drive blocker. Trouble converting early advantages into finishes, lacking hand placement and agility for recovery when beaten. Now, they projected him as a 6th-round pick. Browns got him as a undrafted free agent. Again, that's a guy that could end up being on your team and playing snaps. Could end up being a starter in a few years.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised he wasn't drafted. I mean, there is a lot to like about Cohen. You know, he's a young player, doesn't turn 22 until early August, so early in training camp. But this is a guy who's got a lot of experience. 37 career starts in college over 4 seasons. Played a bunch at Alabama, then transferred to Miami, had a solid season. I think there's questions about just, maybe he's not that long, that maybe he's a guard only. But I think when you look at Cohen, there's enough tools and experience to work with, especially when it comes to his pure power. And maybe if you get him to drop a little weight, he measured in at the combine 324 pounds. Maybe if it's in the 310s, he can get it. He could be a little quicker because he didn't really test well in his pre-draft process, and I think that's what kind of caused him to fall out of being picked. Like you said, potentially a mid to late day 3 selection. So kind of a nice flyer for the Browns there if you're looking at more depth on offensive line. Maybe a guy that you could see, if he doesn't make the roster, spend a lot of this year on the practice squad.
All right, before I let you go, let's take a look at the free agent rookie running back, the undrafted guy that is in with the Browns, Aiden Robbins. This is his RAS. Browns like this, relative athletic score. You see, 4.6 is not great. 40 time, the splits are okay. 3 cones, decent. But again, it's interesting. If he ran a 4.4, he's probably, goes in the 4th, 5th, 6th round.
Yeah, I think with Aiden Robbins, he's an interesting guy. I know Mary Kay Cabot kind of mentioned him as a guy that I think the Browns brought in on a top 30, and he's an interesting player to me because when you look at his stats, they don't really jump off the page from last season. 101 carries, 485 yards and a touchdown, but he missed some time last year with a rib injury. Came back towards the end of the season and had some good moments, especially against Oklahoma. 22 carries, 182 yards. One thing that stands out to me with Robbins is obviously his size, where he doesn't necessarily need to be the fastest guy on the field. He's kind of needing to be that power back that I think the Browns could use in right now. And even looking at some of his advanced numbers from PFF, 15 of his carries were for at least 10 yards. And I've talked about this before. When you have a guy who's used to getting chunk runs, certainly that can translate to pro football. The one thing with Robbins' athletic profile is concerning me is not even necessarily the 40, it's the 10-yard split, because that tells me he needs a little extra runway to kind of get up the top speed versus other guys who can maybe do it a little more quickly. So that's kind of that, plus the lack of productivity he had at BYU is concerning, but good numbers as well at UNLV the year prior. So we're taking a shot on a guy like this, especially a body type that you really don't have right now at running back, as far as, a big bruising running back who has the ability to, is not easy to tackle on first contact.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. We'll talk a little Cavs and a little Guardians in a few minutes, but first, more Browns. John Macri from Pro Football Focus joins us, Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America,
the ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Sam Monson, Steve Palazzolo from Pro Football Focus talked about what they saw from Michael Hall Jr., the Browns' second-round pick.
Absolutely love Michael Hall, but more of an undersized D tackle that, you know, when he wins, he's got those quick wins, really quick. He's got one of the one play reps that go around sometimes on Twitter are fun. He's got one play where he absolutely wrecked Joe Alt in the Notre Dame game. Just felt the down block, swims him, gets in position, makes and finishes a play. That's the type of defensive tackle that he is. And given the depth on the Browns' defensive line, I love that addition of Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State.
Yeah, I didn't love him. You know, he's that undersized, classic, quick. His game is built off quickness in the way some of these other guys are. But like the difference between him, say, and a Kalijah Kancey the year before, I think is stark, and that's why he's a second-round undersized guy as opposed to a first-round guy. Like his game is built off quickness, and he didn't feel that quick on his tape. So I think he's going to have some work to do. Obviously, he'll be a situational guy in that defensive line, but it's a good addition. Like I don't have any problems with it. I just think that's the type of player he is as a second-rounder.
With that, let's welcome in John Macri from Pro Football Focus, co-host of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Johnny, your favorite two picks by the Browns, Michael Hall, Jamari Thrash. What do you like about Hall? And then we'll get into Thrash after that.
Yeah, I quite like Michael Hall, actually. Like, you just look at him over the past 2 years in terms of stable metrics. He was top 5 in this class in key stable pass rush metrics. So his pass rush grade on true pass sets, pass rush grade on non-play action pass rushes, and then his pass rush win rate as well. All top 5 marks in this class. Still some work to do as a run defender. Obviously, being undersized, that makes it a little bit harder for him, but they don't necessarily need him for that, especially in year one, just because of the guys that they have there already. And Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, Quentin Jefferson, like, they have a really strong interior of the defensive line now, and I just really like the addition of Hall's skill set to that group as a potentially, strong pass rushing threat from the middle at maybe down the road.
What do you like about Thrash, and what have you seen from him?
Yeah, so Thrash was kind of one of the underrated wide receivers, I thought, in this class. I thought he profiled more closer to like a day 2 guy. You look at his career yards per route run, for example, 2.52. That's 72nd percentile among wide receiver prospects since 2019. And it's one of the more stable metrics we see from projecting college to the pros. He was primarily an outside wide receiver during his time at Georgia State and in his final college season at Louisville. And he performed really well in that role. His 2.52 yards per route run, even when aligned wide, 78th percentile among prospects, 82.9 PFF receiving grade from that alignment, was 83rd percentile. And he has a really strong ability to win against single coverage as well, which is a big reason for those higher efficiency totals. He had a 92.1 PFF receiving grade when against single coverage, which was a 90th percentile mark since 2019, and 4.47 yards per route run against single coverage for his career against single coverage, like I said. Also a very strong mark. So I like what Thrash can bring as a developmental prospect down the road as well.
Let's take a look at the Browns running back room. This is the kind of a depth chart from Sports Illustrated. They go Jerome Ford, Donta Foreman, Pierre Strong, Nick Chubb, and they don't list Nyheim Hines, but they do have Nyheim Hines kind of a receiving back. When you look at that, just your thoughts on that running back core, the committee, if you will.
Yeah, I think the main thing that stands out to me is that they didn't address the position at all in the draft, right? Even though there was a bit of smoke there that they might, and I'm not going to include UDFA. I think it's Aiden Robbins out of BYU just yet, but overall, I think it's a fairly positive sign on the potential recovery of Nick Chubb from his injury. I know they're still going to be cautious there, but Also, their level of confidence in both Deontay Foreman and Jerome Ford, specifically, who had some positive games last year, finished with a strong 71.5 rushing grade, and that includes the playoffs. And then Foreman, he's coming off a couple of decent years filling in as a starter in Carolina after the Christian McCaffrey trade, and then at times last year when Khalil Herbert was out in Chicago as well. He's not a bad running back either. So, I think the main point here is that they can rely on those guys until Chubb is back, which, hopefully isn't long, and hopefully he comes back close to what he was prior to the injury. And then you have some really capable backups to pair with him and provide relief during the season.
All right, we're going to do the same thing with the wide receiving core. So you look at that. We got Amari Cooper, 1, Elijah Moore, 2, Jerry Jeudy, 3, Cedric Tillman, 4, and the aforementioned Jamari Thrash at number 5. This doesn't list David Bell, who was a third-round pick a couple years ago, and Michael Woods, who's kind of been banged up. You look at that receiving core, just overall, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting top 3, right? Like, these are all guys that they acquired via trade at discounted prices, and there's definitely potential for them to emerge as high-end options at value as well, right? Like, we already have that with Amari Cooper. He's wide receiver 1 by far, but Elijah Moore, another year in the offense. Jerry Jeudy now gets a fresh start outside of Denver. Both of those guys were highly drafted talent, so I think offer significant upside if they continue to develop in Cleveland now, along with Deshaun Watson. And if not, rotating in those guys that they did draft in Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash, David Bell, like you said, to see what they have there. But overall, you got some good options considering, they haven't had a first-round pick since 2021 that they could have used on a potential top wide receiver, for example. So I like what they've kind of built there over the past couple of years.
All right, so we've looked at the wide receiving room. We've looked at the running back room. You've got David Njoku, a veteran offensive line. What do you think are fair expectations for Deshaun Watson coming off a pretty significant shoulder injury this year?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like, he's only played 6 games in each of the past 2 years with the Browns, right? Like, there's only really been small flashes of 2020 Watson, but nothing anywhere close to consistent, right? Like 51.0 passing grade in 2022, 66.8 passing grade in 2023, far from the 91.1 in 2020, his last year with the Texans. But there's been reasons for that. Injury, suspension, obviously the biggest one. So as far as just being able to get consistency in the offense and get back into rhythm, it's been almost impossible to get there. So first things first, expectations for me, like, he has to stay on the field this year. I know that's easier said than done in the NFL, but you just can't have another year come off his contract with him playing less than half the season. And then once he's able to do that, you would hope that he'd be able to build some chemistry with his receiving weapons. And he does have options now where this can work between Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, and just mesh with this offense to at least get back into that, I think, top 15 quarterback range. Doesn't have to be, the top 3 guy we saw 4 years ago now, but I think he needs to be that top 15 quarterback this year and build on that going forward, because it just hasn't been there in the small sample size of the past 2 seasons, unfortunately. So that would be my expectation, for him to get back in the conversation as a top half of the league type quarterback. And if he's able to do that, then we can kind of hopefully raise the bar beyond that going forward.
John Macri from Pro Football Focus, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, John.
Thanks for having me.
John Macri, make sure you check him out. He is the co-host of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. They lead the series with the Magic 3-2. We're talking Cavs on the other side of the break on Sports4CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. They came away with a 1-point win in Game 5 at home, so they now lead their first-round playoff series 3-2 over Orlando. Donovan Mitchell had 28, Darius Garland 23 points to lead that Cavs victory. Now, in games 3 and 4, Cavs were outscored 72-26 in the third quarter by the Magic. Yesterday, the Cavs outscored the Magic 27-23 in the third quarter. J.B. Bickerstaff, head coach, talked about that difference as well as Darius Garland's play.
It was an understanding of what we've been facing and how important that third quarter was going to be. We knew what happened in our losses, wasn't who we needed to be in order to get this game done tonight. And so the group, we discussed it, and they went out and executed it.
As important as that was to get off to the good start that you got off to, which Darius led you there, just, he's been up and down in this series. How crucial was that to the end result?
I was so proud of Darius. The way he came out with the mindset, I'm going to be aggressive. I think it's 17 points in the first quarter. That sets the tone for us. And, when you're playing against Orlando as good as they are defensively, you're going to have to find a way to ignite and be aggressive and make them pay and take the shots that are there. And I thought, his way of leading us tonight was coming out extremely aggressive and confident. Again, understanding how important this game was to us.
So Jared Allen, Cavs center who has played really well in the series, missed the game with bruised ribs. No word on if he will be available for Game 6 or when he will be back. Evan Mobley, without Jared Allen running next to him, game-saving block late in the fourth quarter. J.B. Bickerstaff on Mobley's impact in that Game 5 win.
Defensively, he was huge. He had a great block. He guarded, seemed like everybody out on the floor. And that's what it came down to. It was going to come down to the trenches. It was going to come down to who was going to be able to get a stop in the moment. And Evan was phenomenal defensively, containing the ball, challenging shots, forcing misses, and helping us rebound.
Without Jarrett, how much more important did that become?
We miss Jarrett a lot. We know, he had 18 and 20 rebounds the last time we were here at home. We knew we were going to have to pick up the slack. How Jarrett anchors our defense. Evan was going to have to do the job tonight. And, again, I thought he was phenomenal.
All right, credit to J.B. Bickerstaff. Finally switched up his rotations. Marcus Morris replaced George Niang in the rotations. And Morris, quite honestly, one of the differences in the game. J.B. Bickerstaff on the importance of having a player like Marcus Morris that they can go to.
We kind of scoured the earth at that point of the season to see who was available. Marcus and I have had a relationship since his rookie year back in Houston, so we knew what he's capable of. And he's just a guy you trust, right? He's been through these battles before. He's tough as nails. He's not afraid of shit. He's got big courage. Like that shot he hit from the corner. A lot of guys wouldn't take that. They would have gone and tried to find something else. But he's been through it. There's not a lot he hasn't seen. So it was great for us to be able to go to him tonight. When you've been through the things that Marcus has been through, played with the teams that he's played with, been in the moments that he's been in, and just have the personality. He's not one of these dudes that just does all of this, right? There's a lot of guys in this league that just do a lot of this and aren't willing to back it up. Marcus, is willing to lay it on the line, and he has the courage, to fight through whatever it may be, take the shot, make the pass, box out, like whatever it is. He's not ducking the moment. And, when he talks, it's not lip service. People listen. And he's got that reputation and respect around the league.
And I don't think the Cavs win that game if Marcus Morris isn't on the floor for as long as he was. All right, Donovan Mitchell made some plays in crunch time to help the Cavs win. Mitchell talked about the Cavs play in crunch time and what winning Game 5 means.
We did a lot of things well, and give them credit. They executed well. We fought on the boards, and it's obviously tough when you don't have J.A. out there. But continuing, Evan had a phenomenal 10 defensive rebounds down there. You know what I mean? Marcus coming in and doing this thing. Max, myself, even DG coming in and getting 5. Like it's a team effort. You know what I mean? And even the one where I kicked the ball out of bounds, like that's the effort you want. You know what I mean? So it was great that we did that tonight. Now we got to go down there and do the same thing.
Given all the conversation surrounding you guys since last year, basically, what does a win like tonight show, given the way that it transpired, given how close it was, down to the wire, all that?
And for being honest, nothing. We got to do it again on the road. We won at home. We took care of business at home. We did our job. I'll be answering that question when we take care of business down there. Like that's the mindset for the group. So this doesn't prove anything. We haven't proven anything. We haven't done anything. We got to go down there and handle business.
Yeah, without question. Cavs now head to Orlando with the ability to close out the series and advance to the second round. That's the good news. The bad news is the Cavs lost those 2 games in Orlando earlier in the series by an average of 30 points. And I agree wholeheartedly with Donovan Mitchell. He's absolutely right. Until the Cavs go on the road and win a playoff game, they really haven't done what you expect them to do. So ball's in their court. Go beat the Magic in Orlando, end the series, and then we'll get excited about what's going on with the Cavaliers in the NBA playoffs. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we turn our attention to the Guardians. Tied for the best record in the American League, Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter. On the other side of the break on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
Sports4CLE continues. We turn our attention to the Guardians. One of the best records in baseball and in the American League. In fact, first month grades for every MLB team by ESPN. They give the Guardians one of 4 teams with an A. With Shane Bieber out with Tommy John surgery, Gavin Williams still injured. Guardians are scrambling a little bit in the rotation, but they're scoring runs. Bullpen is also protecting leads. The other thing they note is all last year, Guardians had just 18 home runs from their outfield, and they're not getting the Manny Ramirez, Albert Bell, Kenny Lofton type production, but they are getting some power from the outfield. Let's welcome in Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic. Zack, appreciate the time. Are you surprised by the way the Guardians have played?
Yeah, because if we transported back in time to February or March and you told me, well, they won't have Shane Bieber, they won't have Gavin Williams, the bottom half of the lineup, no one's really outperforming expectations. Hunter Gaddis is going to be your setup man, and you'll see a lot of Tim Herron and Tyler Beatty and Cade Smith. I would have said, what the heck happened here? And I certainly would not have guessed that they'd be 19-10 and tied for the best record in the American League. So it's weird how they've gotten to this point. I'm not quite sure where it goes from here. But if you want to look glass half full, I guess you could say a lot has gone wrong, and they're still thriving.
Yeah, there is something to finding a way to win. Teams that can do that usually find a way to get 5 or 6 or 8 games that they shouldn't have during the course of a season. That's a lot of times the difference between a team that's in contention come September and not. I know you and Jason Lloyd wrote an article, talked to Tristan McKenzie, and that's with The Athletic. McKenzie will get to start against the Astros tonight in Game 2. The Guardians, tough one last night. They gave up a 2-run walk-off. It was Hunter Gaddis after taking the lead in extra innings. Take us through the whole thing with Tristan McKenzie. He shut it down last year and come back and his velocity's down, and you know, it hasn't been great. What have you found out in talking to Tristan?
Yeah, if you look around the league, I think every coach and front office member is terrified and loses sleep at night because their pitchers are tearing their elbows, and everyone needs Tommy John surgery. Everyone needs to go on the injured list. Now, the thing is, everybody has a little bit different of an issue. You know, not every tear is created equally. And so McKenzie had a tear above his elbow last summer, and he was given the choice, what do you want to do from here? Do you want to have surgery? Do you want to rest and then try to pitch through it? And he got different advice from different doctors that he consulted. So he chose to rest, came back in September, made a couple starts, and the hope was he'd have a normal offseason and he'd bounce back in 2024. We haven't quite seen that. You know, the velocity's been down a little bit, but also just the command has been missing, and he doesn't look like the same guy who 2 years ago seemed like a burgeoning ace and Cy Young contender. And they need him. You know, we laid out the issues with the rotation and the injuries, and the bullpen's been overworked because of it. They need McKenzie to be that guy from a couple years ago. So he says he's pain-free, but at the same time, you never know if you made the right choice, right? It's something that he's thinking about, and he's trying to figure out how he can be the best version of himself, and that might not be the same guy that he was 2 years ago. So it's tough. He only made 4 starts last season. You miss so much time. You accumulate rust. You develop new habits, and I think it's a very much a work in progress with him in a rotation that has a lot of works in progress.
Yeah, and you know what? He's a young guy still too. It's not like he's a guy that's been around. So he may be second guessing himself even, and that's the last thing in the world. It's like just go out and pitch, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, and it's tough because it's human nature to wonder, is this, you know, am I still going to tear the elbow? Like, there are examples of guys who pitched through it and never needed the surgery. There are examples of guys who tried the rest and recovery strategy, came back, and then tore it, and you end up missing two and a half seasons because of all that. So you're just constantly reevaluating yourself and assessing how you feel. He said if he tweaks something, if something doesn't feel right, he's wondering if it's related to the elbow somehow. So it's a lot to process, and you're right. Like, I'm sure he's putting pressure on himself because they need innings out of him, and he hasn't been delivering. And I'm sure he's putting pressure on himself because of where he's at in his career. And you're thinking about your earnings potential in the future and landing a mega contract one day. So there's just a lot of factors that go into it. And when you get different consultations and you have to be the one to make the decision, it's something you have to live with, but it's something that you're going to think about just naturally.
Yeah, and for those that don't realize, he's just such a good guy and a good kid and so involved in wanting to make a difference. You hope it works out for him without question. Gavin Williams is another one. That's another young arm. You know, they were ramping him up, and then about a week ago, they kind of told him stop throwing, and that's another guy, you know, if this good start is going to extend, they need guys like that back in the rotation.
They do. I mean, he's built like a workhorse who could throw 200 innings. He's got strikeout stuff. I mean, he was a first-round pick. He was a top prospect, and at times last season, his rookie year, it looked like there was a lot more he could tap into, and yet he still had really good numbers. So you wondered what he could do over a full season. We won't get to see that this year, but you're right. They need him. You know, you got to get healthy, and you could say that someone has a scratch on their elbow, and in baseball, if you're a pitcher, there's no such thing as a minor elbow injury. So you just wonder where this goes from here, and you hold your breath even once he gets back to rehab assignments and all that, because he got pretty far along this time and had to reset. So yeah, again, they're 19-10. There's a lot of good things going for this team, but it is really surprising just based on what they've been known for so many years. The rotation has not been the reason that they're off to a good start.
Yeah, one guy that really has stepped in, Ben Lively. He's probably been better than most expected. Although, there were spots last year with the Reds where he pitched really well for, a month or so. What have you seen from him, and how big of a lift has he given that rotation?
Yeah, it's impressive because he doesn't throw hard, but he looks like he's throwing hard. Everything is max effort, even if it's only 91 miles an hour. He gets good extension on his pitches, so I think 91 from him probably looks like 96. And his journey is impressive. I mean, this is a guy who went to Korea for 3 seasons, and when most guys are in the primes of their career, came back to the majors, is trying to stick and find a home. And it tells you something. An organization that is really good at identifying pitchers that they can help elevate to the next level. They signed him early this offseason. They gave him a guaranteed major league deal. I don't think they're going to do that for everybody. If they like you and you're a priority for them in the offseason, that says something, because they're so good at finding pitchers that maybe are afterthoughts to other teams, and saying, if we think we can help you throw this pitch better, or if you drop this pitch and throw this more often, or change your arm slot, or they're so good at that, and they have been for so long. So it makes sense that it's a good match, and he's off to a good start.
What have you seen from the bullpen? You mentioned Gaddis, and up until this last stretch of games, this last week or so, he was lights out. Now he has struggled. Is it a matter of that they've overworked the bullpen, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Hunter Gaddis also never did this before, right? He went from a starter to, with a few days remaining in spring training, it was confirmed to him that he was going to pitch out of the bullpen, and now he's having to deal with things like pitching on the road 3 out of 4 days against 2 really good lineups, and he had been perfect before that. You're also probably, it's instinct to think, man, I got to be so perfect and careful and fine on the mound because I don't want to blemish my stats that look amazing right now. But overall, the bullpen's been incredible. It's been a reason this team can stay afloat. And you're getting contributions from guys like Cade Smith and Tim Herron that you probably didn't think you were going to this early. And you've got Sam Hentges on his way back. And some guys down below too, like Nick Enright was off to an incredible start at AAA. Franco Alaman, Andrew Walters, those are all guys who could help at some point. So there are some good things. That's a strength. It should continue to be a strength. And they have enough depth there where if one guy like Gaddis is struggling, well, Scott Barlow can pick up slack. Nick Sandlin can pick up slack. And I think Emmanuel Clase looks more like the guy we saw a couple years ago and less like the guy last year who struggled in the 9th inning sometimes.
All right, let's turn our attention real quick to the offense. Stephen Kwan, he's second in the AL in batting at .350. What have you noticed differently about Kwan this year as opposed to last?
He's not afraid to swing early. The book was out on him about this time last year where he would just never swing at the first pitch. And when that happens, pitchers can get ahead of you by throwing a pitch down the middle, knowing you won't swing. It's 0-1. And then, they're in the driver's seat from there. And he's been more aggressive. He's tripled the rate at which he swings at first pitches. He's increased how often he swings in general. And no, this is not a guy who's some hulking slugger who's going to hit 30 bombs. But just that threat in the back of the pitcher's mind, the fact that he already has 3 and his career high is 6 home runs, it means you can't just groove one down the middle. He's so good at laying off pitches. There were some pitches last night that he laid off to draw. I think he drew 2 walks, and some of them might have been strikes, but it's just, he's so good at laying off a pitch that he knows he can't do something with. Sometimes a pitcher makes a perfect pitch, a 97-mile-an-hour fastball at the knees on the outside corner, and if you swing at that, what's the best case scenario? You hit a weak grounder, and if you're ahead in the count 2-0 and that's the pitch, let it go. It's okay. You don't have to swing. And I think that's what he has mastered. And you're seeing just more aggressiveness, and it's translating, and like eventually it'll work back in his favor to where pitchers have to be more careful, knowing the guy's hitting 350. Who wants to throw strikes to that type of hitter? So then you try to pitch around him a little bit. That's when the patience pays off. He draws more walks. So it's just finding the way to leverage some really elite skills he has into being the best hitter he can be, and I think you're seeing that right now.
Well, Josh Naylor's been really good. Jose Ramirez has been really good. Those two have to be. What else have you seen that's enabled the offense to be at least where it is to allow the Guardians to win games?
Yeah, so they've gotten contributions from the bottom of the lineup, but it's a different guy every night. Florial hits a 3-run homer in the series opener in Houston. Maybe Brennan hits one the next day. Maybe it's Tyler Freeman. The issue is none of those guys have been consistent. Bo Naylor has struggled. So they need an answer in the outfield. They need an answer at shortstop. They need Bo Naylor to pick it up at catcher just because he's a really good power and on-base threat. But at least for now, it's worked out to where guys are just getting timely hits. With Florial, with Brennan had a big pinch hit home run in Boston a couple weeks ago. So they've gotten things like that. They just need more consistency, and they need young players to blossom. And maybe that means digging into AAA and it's Kyle Manzardo, or it's Jonathan Rodriguez, or eventually Juan Brito or someone like that. But they're going to need some answers. I don't think you can lean too heavily on Kwan and Naylor to carry you for 6 months. It's been really good for 1 month. I think they're 5th in the majors in runs per game, which you never would have imagined the way the offense floundered last season. They're hitting home runs, which seems foreign. So there are some good things going. I think they just need more of a 1 through 9 approach instead of 1 through 4.
Yeah, and again, they haven't played the elite, but you know what? You have to win games like they're winning games. The challenge is, the big question, can they continue it? It was a great first month. Let's see what the second and third month look like.
Yeah, it's you really can look at it. It is glass half full, glass empty. I mean, they're 19-10 and a lot's gone wrong. So are there better days ahead? The flip side of that would be, if Kwan and Naylor go through a cold spell, are there guys who can pick them up? Can they survive with this rotation? Are there reinforcements that can help them? A lot of question marks, but it's been a more intriguing first month than I think any of us anticipated, and at least you bought yourself some cushion in what's been a strangely competitive AL Central. So, we all thought, hey, maybe 85 wins takes the division, and that might not be the case, but they might be the ones setting the curve. So it just proves once again, none of us know anything about baseball.
And it'll be fun to watch. Zack Meisel, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Zack.
You got it, Dave. Always a pleasure.
Zack Meisel, make sure you check him out, The Athletic. Great Guardians coverage. Always really good stuff. We appreciate Zack Meisel. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.